Have you ever heard the phrase, actions speak louder than words? I know I have. I've heard it many times, and I've actually heard the same message a couple of different ways. And one of the most notable ways I heard it was from a former head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, Marvin Lewis. Oftentimes, in his cheeky little matchups with the media during his press conferences, would say, I see better than I hear. And I'll tell you what, over the last week, what's transpired at the transpired, why did I say it like that? What's transpired at the NFL scouting combine in Indianapolis and the news that came down earlier this week that Tee Higgins has received the franchise tag. I'll tell you what, I can't stop thinking about what Marvin used to say. I see better than I hear. We're going to find out a lot about this organization over the next couple of weeks. Let's get started. Hi, hello, and welcome into the Ball Don't Lie podcast, episode number 127. My name is Austin Elmore. Happy to be here with you again, and happy to be here with you with a lot to talk about. I mean, a lot to talk about with the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm trying to think. I normally start this off with something that's kind of sticking in my craw or a thought that I've had, and I haven't had a lot of that. Like, it's been a relatively chill week. But I do have this question, and it's about the Cincinnati Reds, and it's kind of about baseball in general. And if you can find the answer to this question, let me know. At what point during spring training are we allowed to be critical and concerned about the results of a particular player or unit during the spring training games? I get that the wins and losses don't matter. I don't worry about those. But if players keep making dumb plays and they can't seem to hit a breaking ball, or if they can't throw strikes, at what point in spring training, because we're now 22 days away from spring training or from opening day, at what point are we allowed to express concern or criticism toward a particular player or group of players or coaching staff or whatever it might be when it comes to their inability to do the basics or little parts of their game that you know will be important and translate to the regular season in Major League Baseball? If anybody has the answer to that, let me know, because the lines seem blurred. And every time I make a comment about this or that, people are, oh, it's all just spring training. Okay, that's fine. I know that. But that doesn't mean that this should be acceptable. This doesn't mean that that level of play should be something that we're okay with. And here's another thought about the Reds. Terry Francona did an interview on Tuesday night. Was it Tuesday night? Monday night, when the Reds were playing against the Brewers. And he was basically asked about, this team and their goals and all that. And he said, we want to come to the ballpark every day and kick your ass. Okay. I like that. I love that. Got me fired up. Everything Tito says gets me fired up. But who on the team is a reflection of the manager? Who is that? Who's the guy? It's not Ellie De La Cruz yet. Ellie's a really happy-go-lucky kind of guy. Doesn't seem very tense ever, which is, I think, part of what makes him great. There's not a lot of character. There's not a lot of personality on the team. Spencer Steer's a relatively boring guy. Christian Encarnacion Strand kind of keeps to himself. He wouldn't talk to the media at all when he was in Louisville. Matt McClain, tense, a little bit of that Dustin Pedroia-like mentality, I think, but not all the way outspoken, not that leader yet. Hunter Green, a little bit, has made some strides and some maturity. Who's the guy? Who's the outspoken leader? And how does a team become a reflection of their manager? Anybody know the answer to that question? And it might be through 3.5 weeks or whatever it is of spring training, way too early to expect that the Reds become a reflection of Terry Francona. But that's what I've been told this whole season hinges on, is Terry Francona. So eventually you've got to reflect the identity of your manager. And right now there's a lot of guys on this team that were David Bell guys. And the identity of David Bell was this soft, timid, everything's going to be okay type of guy. Terry Francona isn't like that. The last few years, there haven't been many outspoken, tense, tough type of leaders on this ball club. Jonathan India was one of them. Luke Maley, to an extent, was one of them. Frankie Muntas last year, we got a little bit of that. Haven't really seen it much since Scott Rowland. I mean, on top of that, India played all right, but Muntas and Maley stunk. And your messaging isn't really received well by the clubhouse if you're not producing on the field. That to me just seems like an issue. I hope that's something the Reds figure out over the next couple of weeks. How do they reflect the identity of their manager? How do they collectively as a ball club find their identity over the next 3 weeks so that they can hit the ground running and start fast when the season starts? These are my questions about the Reds. And I'm not going to get as much into, the whole Reds conversation this year. I'll touch on them much like I did just now in the beginning segment, but I'm not going to make everything this whole podcast about the Reds. I'm not going to. It's really, like I said when I came back, it's going to be primarily Bengals focused. So let's talk about the Bengals. On Tuesday, the NFL franchise tag deadline was at 4:00 p.m. And most people believed that the Bengals would be right up to the deadline trying to get a deal done with Tee Higgins. And they were very close and they were pushing hard to make it happen. And they might just have to, put the deal done, put the tag on so that they have a little bit more time to get the deal done. Well, 2:30 in the afternoon on Monday, a good 22 hours ahead of the tag deadline, Tee Higgins announces on his Twitter, like he said he would, that he was going to let us know first. He announces he's getting the franchise tag. This would lead some to believe that the Bengals and their negotiations with Higgins are probably not as close as we had hoped. Probably not as close to getting a deal done as we thought they would be. So, putting the franchise tag on him does a couple of things. First of all, it prevents him from getting to free agency. Many believe he would be the most sought-after free agent. He's not going to get that opportunity. He is right now under contract for the Bengals for the 2025 season at $26.2 million. That is up $5 million from last year when he received the franchise tag the first time. The Bengals have never franchise tagged a player twice. Most of the time, when a player is franchise tagged twice, they often get a deal done immediately thereafter or close, or they leave in free agency the following season. Those are the two true outcomes. But more often than not, a player gets an extension done. So that is something to keep in mind. What this also does, it gives them until July 15th to continue negotiating. If they do not have a deal in place by July 15th, which is just over 130 days from now, then Tee Higgins is contractually obligated to play on the franchise tag in 2025. He will not want to do that. He wants more guaranteed money down the line. He wants assurances for himself and his family that he will be taken care of past the 2025 season. As we know, football is a brutal game, and you never know which snap could be your last. That's why these guys want the money that they do so that they are good to go for the rest of their lives. And I'm not saying that $21 million last year and $26 million this year is nothing. When you compare it to other wide receivers across the NFL, over the last 2 seasons, if Higgins plays on the tag this year, he will have made the 8th most money of all wide receivers in the NFL. That's pretty good for him. But again, it is the uncertainty of life down the line. One of these days, I'll have to go through and try to explain just how much of the contract and the money is eaten up each week by various things, whether it's meals, tickets, jerseys that you trade or swap with someone, taxes in and of itself, signing, but all that stuff. It does take a very sizable chunk out of your weekly pay. It's never just $26 million. Here you go. You're happy. Taxes and everything else plays a role in that. But here's my issue. I got to the point where I did not expect Tee Higgins to get franchise tagged. I said on this podcast last week that the people I was talking to were very confident that a long-term extension would get done. To me, that translated to a long-term extension is going to get done prior to the franchise tag happening. That's what I thought was going on. That's what I expected. But that didn't happen. They have now put the franchise tag on Tee Higgins. And it's especially surprising considering the tone and the way that the Bengals approach things at the scouting combine. So the scouting combine happens in Indianapolis every year, and it's one of 2 times during the year that media actually gets to hear and speak to Duke Tobin. Duke Tobin is the Bengals' director of player personnel. Many call him their de facto GM. One of the longtime criticisms with the Bengals is that they don't have a GM. For years and years and years, fans have asked the organization to hire a GM who can come in and build the roster. The Bengals have often said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to keep it in-house. We've got Mike, we've got Katie, we've got Troy, we've got Duke. All together, those people come together to do the job of a GM. So Duke often denies requests to talk to the media, only talks once or twice a year early on in training camp, and during the scouting combine. He rarely makes you feel good about the Bengals. He, I would say, often toes the company line, is someone that repeats the same stuff over and over and over again, that the organization doesn't really commit to much. They're not very transparent. They're not very passionate or pointed or any of those things about the way they speak about players, about roster building, about contracts. They just historically don't do that. They basically never have. But there was an entirely different tone from Duke Tobin at the combine this year. I mean, entirely different. Take a listen to his opening statement, his remarks on the Bengals defense, and how last season left a bad taste in his mouth.
We did not achieve what we wanted to achieve. While we finished the year with 5 straight wins, in the middle of the season we managed to turn wins into losses. 7 times we did that, and it kept us out of a shot to win the championship. We believe we're a championship caliber team, and we'll go to work and put it back together in the best way, and we'll compete for the championship next year. We know our defense wasn't good enough. It couldn't get stops when we needed it, couldn't protect leads, it didn't get off the field, and then, in critical moments when the game was on the line, it didn't rise to the occasion. 4th and 16 against Kansas City, that's one play, we win one game, now we're in the playoffs. But that's countless games throughout the year, whether it's our offense converting a first down to run the clock out to win the game, whether it's our special teams converting a field goal to win the game, but multiple times, a fumble going into the end zone, all the things that happened. It was a crazy year. We're a championship level team that didn't get an opportunity, and that irritates us. It irritates all of us. It irritates our fans, and we're not happy about it. And we're going to attack the offseason to make sure it doesn't happen again.
That sort of thing, you never hear that from Duke Tobin. Ever. You never, ever hear that from Duke. And it's so incredibly rare for him to speak like that. There's never been that sort of passion. There's never been that sort of transparency. And to me, as a Bengals fan and also someone in the media, I'm looking around thinking, wow, okay, these guys are serious. Like, they believe that they're going to be able to get this done. They're angry about last season, and they have a plan that needs to be executed, and they plan on executing so that this window stays open for as long as possible. That gave me a lot of hope. That gave me a lot of belief that the Bengals were heading in the right direction, because I've never heard him or anyone in that organization talk like that before. And of course, the topic that everybody wanted to know about last week at the Combine was Tee Higgins. Here's what Tobin had to say about their negotiations with Higgins.
I think you guys all know what I feel about Tee Higgins. I think Tee Higgins is a fantastic football player, and I want him on my football team. Whenever I'm in charge of a football team, I want Tee Higgins. And so I'm going to do what I can to get Tee Higgins. Our preference with Tee Higgins is to do a long-term agreement. Always has been. It continues to be, and we'll work hard to get that done. You know, we are fortunate. We've got a lot of really good football players, fantastic football players, and we're fortunate to be in a position to where we can fit them all in. We've managed our cap well. We've got low dead money. We want a high payroll and low dead money so the people that are in Cincinnati playing for us can get all the money. That's what we want. And we're in a position to re-sign these guys, and it's a good position to be in. It really is. And we're going to attack it, and hopefully, we don't want to just re-sign these guys and pay more for the same football team we had last year. We want to add to it as well. So we want to re-sign these guys, reward them for their ability level, and add to the football team. So it's a tall task. We think we're up to it, and Katie's got us in position to attack it well. Yeah, I'm optimistic until there's reason not to be, and I've always been optimistic with T, and I want a long-term deal. You know, he fits with us, and we fit with him. It's a great match, and so there's no reason not to work hard to continue the relationship for sure. Yeah, obviously T is the one that's not signed for the future right now, and so that puts the onus on us to do something there one way or the other earlier. Jamar is always going to be our priority. He's a fantastic football player. He's going to end up being the number one paid non-quarterback in the league. We're there. Let's get it done. The earlier we can do some of this stuff, the freer it gives us to build the rest of the team. We have other needs that we want to build, and so we want to get these kind of things done early enough to where we can really focus on building out the rest of the football team. But they're all priorities to us. But the ones that aren't signed are the ones that are on the table first. I'm optimistic. I want deals done, just like our quarterback wants deals done. Everything he says, I agree with. I want them done. I want the best players available. And I also want to add more players to our team. Again, I don't want to just pay more money for the same team we had last year. We have other needs, and I want to go after those needs as well.
How do you not listen to that and think, oh, okay, they're close. Like, this is going to happen. Like, the Bengals understand the enormity of getting this contract done. Everybody and their brother is talking about how the Bengals need to get this done, and they believe that they can get this done. So that got me and a lot of other Bengals fans really excited. There was a couple notable things in there, including the fact that Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase now have the same agent. And Tobin said his priority is the guy who is currently not under contract, which is Tee Higgins. He also said that Jamar will always be their priority, and they are going to make him the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. That sort of language has never been used by the Bengals before, ever. They didn't say that about Joe Burrow, that they were going to make him the highest paid player in the history of the NFL. They never talk like that. So to me, it sends the message, okay, they are serious about this. They're tired of all the criticism. They're tired of what Joe Burrow said in the media, and they are going to get this done. That's what it all said to me, right? That makes sense. But 5, 6, 7 hours later, Tee Higgins tweeted. So he's tweeted 3 times in the last month. One was, I'm going to let y'all know first, saying he would tell his followers what happens. We'd be the first ones to know. The second was what happened 6 hours, 7 hours after Duke Tobin spoke at the Combine. It was simply a blue hat emoji. For those of us who are chronically online, that can be translated to cap. For those that don't know, cap is a better way of saying bullshit. Basically, calling someone out for lying. That's what cap means. And so, of course, no one really knows exactly what Higgins is referring to. He could have been watching a Laker game. He could have just been trolling the fans. Who really knows? But the overwhelming belief is that Higgins was essentially calling Duke Tobin and the conversation at the Combine a lie. He was basically calling bullshit on all of that. Now, after all this stuff that Tobin said, and you're going to hear from Zach Taylor in a moment too, all of the stuff that Tobin and Taylor said, it made me feel really excited that the Bengals are really going to do something. It created goodwill between the Bengals and the fan base. Okay, they're listening, they understand, maybe they can be trusted to get this done. And then Tee Higgins says, cap. You lose instantly all the goodwill, and the belief and the doubt starts to creep back in that the Bengals and Higgins may not be able to get this thing done. I mentioned Zach Taylor. Here's what he had to say about Higgins and Chase in those negotiations.
Well, number one, it's good to have great players that want to be rewarded. That's a great problem to have. And, with Jamar, we certainly want to make him the highest paid non-quarterback in this league. He's deserved that. Went into a year and won the Triple Crown and did all the things he could do for us to just have a tremendous year. So we'll continue to work through for that. Tee Higgins, same time, working on a long-term deal with him. We want Tee around here, not just next year, but in the future. And Tee's been a big part of all the wins that we've had and keeping defenses accountable so Jamar can have his best days and Joe can have his best days and Tee. And so, again, that's a trio that we want to keep together, and we feel like we're best when we have those guys.
Much of the same from Zach. Much of the same from Duke. Like those two things, they're hand in hand. And it got me excited, got me fired up. Like, okay, let's finally believe in this. And then there are reports coming out throughout the combine and what people are hearing and all this, that the Bengals are working hard to get the extension done with Tee Higgins. That's what we keep hearing over and over and over again. The Bengals are working hard to get this deal done. Again, belief that the organization is doing the right thing. And then here we are, Monday at 2:30 in the afternoon, Tee Higgins announces, I'm getting franchise tagged. 22 or 26 hours ahead of the deadline to get the deal done, you don't really feel great about where they stand. On top of that, you have reports surfacing from Diana Russini of The Athletic that the Bengals have made an offer to Jamar Chase, but the two are, quote, far apart in negotiations. This comes right after Duke Tobin and company said that the structure and the framework for Jamar Chase is already there because he chose not to take the deal before last season. I don't know that it's as simple as just picking up where you left off if you're the Bengals. Because now Jamar had one of the most successful and historic seasons in the history of the National Football League. He's going to want a lot more money, and he's going to want a lot more guaranteed money. And I do appreciate that Tobin was saying, I don't want to spend money on the same players and have the same team and fall short again. I appreciated that he was constantly talking about championships, and we're not happy, and we want to win championships, and we want good players on our team. I appreciated all those things. And it was good to hear all those things. But at the end of the day, is it not your actions that speak louder than your words? The other thing that I found interesting is that some perceive Duke's comments as applying pressure to his bosses on Katie Blackburn and Troy Blackburn. Katie, if you don't know, is the daughter of Mike Brown. Mike is the owner of the team. Mike, of course, the son of Paul Brown, who founded the team. So Katie, for years, has been negotiating contracts. Troy handles a lot of that as well, and they're financially stewarding the organization, I guess, is the best way to do it. They handle relations all around. Like Troy is headlining or is leading the negotiations with Hamilton County over the stadium lease deal, which is something we'll get into over the summer. Katie does a lot of the football stuff. She is one of the more successful and prominent women in the National Football League. She has had a very successful career. But she is, like her father and her grandfather, stubborn. And they have a set way of doing things, and they've done it for a long time. You heard Duke in that clip mention that Katie has set us up well. It tells me, I got the idea, and I got the belief, and I asked some people about this who were in Indianapolis, and they seem to agree that some of the tone that Duke Tobin was putting out there and the language and the words that he was using almost in a way felt like applying pressure to Katie and Troy to get the deals done. And the reason for that could be that nobody outside of maybe Zach Taylor has had his name dragged through the mud more than Duke Tobin over the last year. He's also not officially a GM. And more than anything, the GM part of the job goes to Katie and goes to Mike and goes to Troy. So he can only do so much in terms of being the director of player personnel and heading up the scouting department, but ultimately the decisions fall on his bosses. So he can advise and he can help negotiate and he can say these things, but ultimately it's them that have the final say. It's them that are doing the negotiating. It's their money at the end of the day that we're talking about here. And so I think some people perceive that, and I did a little bit as well, as putting some pressure on them to be willing to do what's necessary to keep this roster as competitive as possible to try to win a championship. That's incredibly important. And it felt like a bit of a shift from Duke Tobin and the front office staff to maybe put a little bit of pressure on themselves to get this thing done. For example, when they announced the franchise tag for Tee Higgins, they again used language that they've never used before in the press release. It says right here, the Bengals today, this is from Monday, the Bengals today designated wide receiver Tee Higgins as the team's franchise player with the intent of continuing to work toward a long-term deal in Cincinnati. So again, they're saying, we want a long-term deal here. We are working on a long-term deal here. That's what we want. Okay, now it's up to you. They continue to put pressure on themselves to actually make this happen, to actually make the fan base believe. And I'll tell you what, they've got to get this done as soon as possible because free agency starts in a week. It starts on March 12th, 4 o'clock. That's when the new league year begins. On March 10th at, at midnight, the legal tampering period begins. So you can begin negotiating with free agents on March 10th. It all becomes official and legal to sign those players on March 12th at 4 p.m. So there's not a lot of time here to get this thing done so that you know exactly how much money is on the books for Tee Higgins in 2025, and then you can move forward with the Jamar Chase extension, and you can figure out what you want to do with the rest of your roster. Speaking of the rest of your roster, they have made a couple of moves that many believe to be necessary, moves that were expected, and moves that create more cap space for this team. They cut Sheldon Rankins, and they cut Alex Kappa. Those save about $16 million, closer to $20 million against the cap going into 2025. That's a good thing. That is, again, the Bengals working and doing things a little bit differently. Historically, they would wait to cut those players. They would wait until they had replacements to cut those players. But no, they're cutting them now. They're cutting them early. Again, a sign that they are willing to add and want to add to those various positions and are doing so and moving on from those players now rather than waiting. It is putting pressure on themselves again to act in the way that's necessary to build a championship caliber team. So I'm seeing all the right things. I'm seeing all the right things. I'm hearing all the right things. But are they going to actually do it? That's the big thing. And I understand why a lot of Bengals fans have doubt. I would have doubt too. I do have doubt. And I don't want to go through an entire summer dealing with this again. If it gets to July 15th and they don't have a deal done with Tee Higgins, it's going to be catastrophic. Because I would assume by that point they still don't have a deal done with Jamar Chase. And again, to reiterate Diana Rossini's report that they are, quote, far apart with Jamar Chase. That should not be the case at this point. You've repeatedly said you're going to make him the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. To me, being far apart means Jamar Chase is like, no, I need a lot more guaranteed money than that. And I need more money up front than that. Because the Bengals historically just don't structure their contracts that way. They've got to be willing to bend on these situations to be able to keep the window open. It is these things, these moments, where you find out just how serious an organization is about their commitment to win a championship. I believe it is a fan's job to hold an organization accountable. I believe the standard should always be excellence. You should always be pushing for your team to be in aggressive pursuit of a championship. When your feet hit the floor in the morning, that should be your goal. Aggressive pursuit of a championship. If you're not doing that, you're in the wrong business. So I keep hearing all the right things from the Bengals, but it's time to start seeing it. Get the Higgins deal done before free agency, chart the path for Higgins and Hendrickson, and add on to this team, which desperately, desperately needs a lot of holes filled as you've cut players already, so that the window that is here with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and others will not at any point be closed over the next couple of years. And also, in doing so, change the narrative around your franchise. The narrative that exists around the Bengals is that they are cheap. The reason that narrative exists is because it's true. And there is years and years and years of evidence that would suggest it is true. And until you start doing things to change that narrative, you will not be taken seriously by the national media, by your fan base, by other fan bases, and by players and coaches in the league. If you want to change that narrative, you have to change. Period, point blank. Thank you so much for listening to episode number 127 of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. You can hear me weekdays from 12 to 3 on ESPN 1530. I co-host a show over there with Tony Pike. It's called Cincy 360. You can also listen to the podcast of that show anywhere you get your podcasts, including the iHeartRadio app. As always, follow me on basically everything: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, whatever. Just search at Auty Elmore, and you will find me. That's AutyElmore. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you again next week. And gosh, I love this stuff. I love that football never stops. It's the best. Have fun. Be safe. Go Bucs.